As each new immigrant group got more of a foothold in America, they filled more theater seats, and what they saw of themselves on stage changed for the better. Vaudevillians knew you don't get nasty about the Irish in a theater full of Irish. But with African Americans segregated in the balcony, or excluded entirely from the audience, there was no such thing in mainstream vaudeville as a theater full of them. And it was that way for almost a century.
Hey, Skinny! The minstrel show's coming to town!
Beginning in the 1840s, the minstrel show was America's first entertainment craze.
It started with northern white performers who observed blacks or Negroes or slaves at that point, really entertaining themselves.
Say, I have an idea.
Yes.
You be around here about a half hour before the show.
You mean you gonna let me watch up close?
Jim Crow, you'll practically be right on the stage.
Woo! Wheel about and turn about, change and...
Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow.
Give me back my clothes, please.
What they did was to imitate some of the actions they saw, some of the songs that they saw these slaves singing, and to put on grease paint or blackface.
Blacks had little power to protest their characterizations, although many tried. Whites could parody them, but they could parody no one but themselves. Eventually, African Americans formed their own minstrel companies, billing themselves as real Negro delineators. Whites couldn't compete with their authenticity and often their talent, so they turned their own minstrel shows into vaudeville. But blackface characterizations were still an essential part of the act.
That's what the minstrels are here for, so stand up and cheer for those grand old minstrels there.
At the same time, African Americans were being lynched by the hundreds and shunned by mainstream society. They were the subjects of the most popular music of the time, so-called coon songs, that, like minstrel shows, depicted black life as free, careless, and non-threatening to anyone. Whites were led to believe that this young man's sole desire was to sing and dance for them.
If I saw a blackface performer at that time, I guess I was in my early teens on Vaudeville. I didn't think anything of it because it was the time that I was living. It was the late 20s. I can look back now. I dislike having to say this, but I realize my mother and father were bigots. But I think everybody in Chicago were bigots.
Sitting by the river on a summer evening, listening to the darkest hum.
White vaudevillians maintained that white fantasy begun during minstrel times, that separate but equal was okay with Mammy, and that blacks were simple, happy creatures who loved to entertain and had lots of time to do it, with just a little cotton picking here and there between fish fries and steamboat arrivals.
Listening to the steamboat blow.
The myth lasted a very long time, as Topsy and Eva, vaudeville's Duncan sisters, were still working it in 1960. The Duncans were the last minstrels. Real African Americans were forced to go along with the myth by wearing ridiculous or stereotyped clothing on stage, and only playing versions of Sambo or Zip Coon.
Because Sambo was the willing retainer. He was that slave who who would sing songs like Carry Me Back to Old Virginia. On the other hand, Zip Coon then becomes an aggressive black man who's still ignorant, but is pretentious.
Black performers almost always had to be in a racial context.
I don't know why I feel this way.
Eunice Wilson sings a fine number that has nothing to do with fruits and vegetables. So why does she have to do it in front of giant watermelons?
Now